The last part of the equation before we move on to working on app is when a user signs in, kicking them to the app page, to the index page, and then between refreshes, re-authenticating them, where if they're authenticated, they can stay, otherwise they're kicked back to login. So first of all, we need to keep track of, across our application, whether our user is authenticated or not. Within our reducer, we're going to add a new case. In this case will be called isLoggedIn. IsLoggedIn is going to update a new piece of state that will add to context, so we'll spread in all of the previous state values into this new object that we're returning, and we're going to update a property called isAuth with the payload. So we need to create isAuth in our context object within context.js. So isAuth will initially be false. By default, the user is not going to be authenticated. However, within login, when onSuccess runs, we want to update this value, so we'll dispatch a new action of type isLoggedIn, and the payload, instead of just setting this to true, we can use or grab a value that's more reliable by taking Google user, the object, and executing a method on it called isSignedIn. So isSignedIn is going to return true whenever Google OAuth has actually authenticated our user. Then, as I mentioned, within our splash page, when we detect that a user has been logged in according to our state, we want to kick them to the app component, to the root route. So to do that, within splash, and we'll head there in our pages directory. Within splash, we need to read from state, and remember that in order to read from our global state, we can use the useContext hook. But in order to use context, we'll also need the context object itself. So we'll import context from /context. So we'll pass in context to use context, and we'll get back our state, which we destructure. Then we'll set up a conditional here, where if state.isAuth is true, we want to redirect to the root route. So to do that, we can bring in a component called redirect from our router library, React Router DOM. So we'll return redirect, and this will be directing users to just /. Otherwise, if isAuth isn't true, we'll just return and display the login component. So now we'll save all these files, and when we log in, immediately we're kicked to the root route. Now, one slight problem is that if we sign out of Google, if we're unauthenticated, and we can check to make sure that's the case by refreshing our login page, and if we're not taken to the root route, we're not logged in. The problem is we only want authenticated users to be able to see our app, but in the app's current state, we can still go to / without any problems. We're not kicked back to login. So in order to fix this, we need to change our routing a bit. We go to index.js, and we need to make our app route, we need to make it a protected route. So it too will check, before we actually go to this route, our auth state. So within source, we'll add a new component called protectedRoute.js, and this route is going to be replaced with our normal route component, like so. So it's going to receive all of the props that the route component did previously. So in order to create this protected route, we'll first import React. We'll also need use context to read from our app state. We'll create our protected route component, and we'll need to destructure from its props first component, which we'll rename as capital C component, and then the rest of the props, which we'll grab as ... rest. We'll grab our context object from /context, and we'll use context, passing context in and destructuring state from what's returned. Now to create this protected route, we're going to need to extend the route component from React router DOM. So we'll return a route, and first of all we're going to spread in all of the props that we're collecting with REST, like so. So all of the props that we're putting on protected route will be passed down a level to the route itself so that it'll work properly. And then in terms of what this route will render, we'll use the render prop, the prop on route known as render, I should say. Then we'll get access to props. And once again, we'll use a ternary. We'll say if not state.isAuth, if our user's not authenticated, we want to redirect them. So we'll import the redirect component, and we will return that. We'll redirect to /login. Otherwise, we want to render the component. So we'll provide component and spread all of the props that we're getting in render to it. Make sure at the bottom to export default protected route. Then we'll head back to our index page, or to our index file, and we'll import with our components protected route from /protected route. And then all we have to do is replace the name route, or rather add on to the name route protected. And once it's done, we can save our files. And then if we make sure that we're unauthenticated and try going to our app component, we're immediately kicked back to the login route.